The morning sun painted the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and crimson as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her rifle scope for the third time. The observation post sat like a lonely sentinel on the rocky outcrop, overlooking the valley where intelligence suggested enemy movement. She had volunteered for this assignment when the original sniper fell ill with dysentery. Her commanding officer hesitated before approving her request, not because he doubted her skills, but because the position was considered a probable target for insurgent attacks. Maria had earned her reputation through countless missions across 3 deployments. Born in East Los Angeles to immigrant parents, she joined the Marines at 18 to escape poverty and prove herself in a world that often underestimated women. Her father worked construction. Her mother cleaned offices at night. Neither understood why their daughter chose the military over community college, but they supported her decision with quiet pride. The observation post consisted of little more than reinforced concrete barriers, sandbags, and a small communications bunker. 2 other Marines shared the position with Maria. Corporal James Mitchell, a 20-year-old from Ohio, manned the radio equipment. Private First Class Danny Torres handled supplies and served as spotter. Both men respected Maria's expertise, having witnessed her precision during previous operations. At dawn, the valley appeared peaceful. Farmers tended their fields in the distance, and goat herders guided their flocks along ancient paths. The normalcy felt deceptive to Maria, who had learned to read the subtle signs of impending danger. Birds flew in unusual patterns. The usual morning sounds from nearby villages seemed muted. Local children, who typically played near the stream, were nowhere to be seen. Mitchell received word over the radio that a Marine patrol was en route to their position. 230 Marines from Bravo Company were conducting a sweep of suspected weapons caches in the surrounding area. The operation had been planned for weeks, designed to disrupt insurgent supply lines before a major offensive. As the sun climbed higher, Maria noticed movement in the tree line approximately 800 meters away. Through her scope, she identified at least 15 armed fighters positioning themselves among the rocks and sparse vegetation. Her training kicked in as she calculated wind speed, temperature, and bullet drop. She whispered coordinates to Torres, who relayed the information to Mitchell. The first shots came from multiple directions simultaneously. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions Maria had not previously identified, indicating a much larger enemy force than initially observed. The concrete barriers around their position began chipping and cracking under sustained automatic weapons fire. Mitchell worked frantically to establish contact with the approaching Marine column, while Torres fed ammunition and provided target updates. Maria's first shot dropped an insurgent fighter who was attempting to flank their position from the north. Her second eliminated a machine gunner who had established a devastating field of fire across the valley floor. Each shot was deliberate, calculated to maximize disruption of the enemy attack while conserving ammunition for the prolonged engagement she sensed was coming. The radio crackled with urgent communications as the Marine patrol found itself under attack from the same insurgent force. Mitchell relayed that Bravo Company was pinned down in the valley, taking heavy casualties from mortars and rocket-propelled grenades. The observation post suddenly transformed from a simple monitoring station into a critical defensive position that could determine the fate of over 200 Marines. Torres spotted movement in a dry creek bed that provided concealed approach routes to their position. Maria shifted her attention to this new threat, identifying at least 20 fighters armed with assault rifles and rocket launchers. The enemy had clearly planned this ambush carefully, positioning forces to attack both the observation post and any Marine units in the valley simultaneously. The sound of incoming mortar rounds whistled overhead, impacting dangerously close to their concrete barriers. Shrapnel scattered across their position, forcing all 3 Marines to take cover behind the thickest sections of their defensive walls. Maria realized that the enemy had likely pre-registered their position for indirect fire support, making their situation increasingly precarious. As the morning progressed, the intensity of the attack escalated. Enemy fighters advanced under cover of suppressive fire, attempting to overwhelm the observation post through sheer numbers. Maria methodically engaged targets at varying ranges, her training allowing her to remain calm despite the chaos surrounding their position. Mitchell established intermittent contact with various elements of Bravo Company, receiving fragmented reports of casualties and requests for immediate support. The Marine column was scattered across multiple positions in the valley, unable to maneuver effectively due to the coordinated enemy ambush. Several units reported being completely cut off from the main force. The observation post became the only friendly position capable of providing overwatch for the embattled Marines below. Maria's elevated position allowed her to identify enemy positions that were invisible to the forces in the valley. Her precise fire began systematically eliminating key insurgent leaders and weapons crews, gradually reducing the effectiveness of the enemy attack. Torres maintained a steady stream of target identification and range estimation, his voice steady despite the obvious danger they faced. Mitchell continued coordinating with scattered Marine units while attempting to call for air support or artillery assistance. The communication equipment suffered damage from flying shrapnel, creating intermittent connectivity issues that complicated their efforts. As the sun reached its zenith, Maria realized they were running low on ammunition. She had fired nearly 60 rounds, each one carefully aimed to maximize impact on the enemy force. The sustained engagement had depleted their supplies faster than anticipated, and resupply seemed impossible given their isolated position and the intensity of the ongoing battle. The enemy appeared to recognize the critical role the observation post played in disrupting their ambush. Insurgent forces began concentrating their efforts on overrunning Maria's position, understanding that eliminating the sniper would allow them to complete their attack on the trapped Marines. Rocket-propelled grenades began impacting with increasing accuracy against their defensive barriers. Despite the mounting pressure, Maria continued engaging targets with methodical precision. Her shots disrupted enemy assault formations and eliminated threats to the Marines below. Each round fired represented a calculated decision to protect her fellow service members, even as her own position became increasingly untenable. The battle had raged for over 3 hours when Mitchell received word that reinforcements were finally approaching. A quick reaction force had been dispatched from the main operating base, but their estimated arrival time remained uncertain due to enemy roadblocks and improvised explosive devices along the route. Maria knew that holding their position until reinforcements arrived would require every remaining round of ammunition and all the tactical skill she possessed. The enemy showed no signs of retreating, and their attacks were becoming more coordinated and aggressive. The observation post stood as the last line of defense between the insurgent force and a potential massacre of trapped Marines in the valley below. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the observation post as Maria wiped sweat and dust from her face. Her rifle barrel was dangerously hot from continuous firing, requiring careful management to maintain accuracy. Torres had fashioned a makeshift cooling system using their limited water supply, but ammunition remained their most critical concern. They had perhaps 20 rounds remaining. Mitchell's radio finally crackled with better news. Elements of Alpha Company had broken through enemy roadblocks and were advancing toward their position, but they faced determined resistance from insurgent fighters who seemed willing to fight to the death. The enemy understood that this battle represented a significant opportunity to inflict massive casualties on American forces. Through her scope, Maria observed enemy fighters dragging wounded comrades to covered positions, while fresh fighters took their places. The insurgent force demonstrated unusual discipline and organization, suggesting the presence of experienced foreign fighters or former military personnel. Their tactics evolved throughout the engagement. adapting to her shooting patterns and attempting to neutralize her effectiveness. A new threat emerged as enemy fighters attempted to climb the rocky face of the observation post itself. Torres spotted the climbers first, alerting Maria to targets that were dangerously close to their position. She shifted to her sidearm for these close-range engagements, conserving rifle ammunition for longer-range threats that only she could effectively engage. The physical and mental demands of the prolonged firefight began taking their toll. Maria's shooting hand trembled slightly from exhaustion, requiring conscious effort to maintain steady aim. Her throat was parched, and the constant stress of life-or-death decisions was mentally exhausting. Yet she continued methodically engaging targets, understanding that any lapse in her performance could result in catastrophe. Mitchell reported that several wounded Marines in the valley required immediate medical evacuation, but helicopter operations were impossible due to the ongoing ground fire. The observation post's ability to suppress enemy positions around potential landing zones became crucial for any rescue attempt. Maria began prioritizing targets that threatened medical evacuation routes. Torres discovered that one of their defensive barriers had been severely compromised by repeated rocket impacts. Large sections of concrete had cracked and shifted, creating gaps in their protection. They used sandbags and equipment to reinforce the weakened areas, but their defensive position was clearly deteriorating under sustained attack. Enemy mortar fire increased in accuracy as the afternoon progressed. The insurgents had obviously adjusted their aim based on previous impacts, and rounds were landing within meters of the observation post. One near miss showered them with debris and temporarily disrupted their communication equipment, forcing Mitchell to perform hasty repairs under fire. Maria noticed that the enemy was beginning to coordinate their attacks more effectively. Instead of random assaults, they synchronized suppressive fire with movement, indicating better tactical leadership. This development made her job significantly more difficult, as targets appeared for shorter periods and in more protected positions. The sound of approaching helicopters provided momentary hope until Mitchell received word that the aircraft were forced to abort their approach due to heavy ground fire. Several Marine units in the valley were critically low on ammunition and medical supplies, making the observation post's continued resistance even more vital for their survival. As shadows began lengthening across the valley, Maria realized they had been fighting for over 6 hours. Her initial estimate of enemy strength had proven woefully inadequate. Instead of the 15 to 20 fighters she first observed, they faced what appeared to be a coordinated assault by more than 60 insurgents, many of whom were clearly experienced combatants. Torres reported movement in previously secure areas, indicating that enemy forces were attempting to surround their position completely. Maria divided her attention between multiple threat sectors, engaging targets that posed the most immediate danger while trying to maintain awareness of the overall tactical situation. The radio brought concerning news about casualties among Bravo Company. Several Marines had been killed, and many more required urgent medical attention. The insurgent ambush had achieved significant success, and the observation post remained the primary factor preventing a complete tactical disaster. Enemy fighters began using smoke grenades to obscure their movements, making target identification much more challenging. Maria had to wait for clear shots, conserving her remaining ammunition while maintaining pressure on the advancing insurgents. Every round had to count, as resupply remained impossible. Mitchell established contact with the Quick Reaction Force, learning that they were still several hours away due to sustained enemy resistance along their route. Multiple roadside bombs had damaged vehicles, and they faced ambushes at several choke points. The observation post would need to continue holding their position well into the evening. A rocket-propelled grenade struck their communications bunker directly, destroying much of their equipment and injuring Mitchell with flying debris. Torres immediately began first aid while Maria continued engaging targets alone. Mitchell's injuries were serious but not life-threatening, though their ability to coordinate with friendly forces was severely compromised. The loss of reliable communications changed the tactical situation dramatically. Maria could no longer receive updates about friendly force movements or call for fire support. She was forced to make independent decisions about target engagement while hoping to avoid accidentally engaging friendly forces that might be maneuvering in the valley. Enemy fighters sensed the weakness in their position and increased the intensity of their assault. Maria found herself engaging targets at ranges as close as 100 meters, using every skill learned during years of training and combat experience. Her precision remained steady, despite exhaustion and the mounting pressure. Torres managed to establish limited radio contact using backup equipment, but the signal was weak and intermittent. They received fragmented reports about the Quick Reaction Force's progress and updates about casualties in the valley. The situation remained critical, with several Marine units reporting ammunition shortages. As the sun began setting behind the mountains, Maria counted her remaining ammunition. 8 rounds remained in her rifle, with 2 full magazines for her sidearm. The enemy showed no signs of retreating, and darkness would bring new challenges to an already desperate situation. The observation post had become a symbol of resistance that prevented the ambush from achieving complete success. Maria understood that her position was both critical and increasingly untenable. The approaching night would favor the insurgents, who possessed better knowledge of the local terrain and could move more freely under cover of darkness. Despite the overwhelming odds, she prepared for the final phase of what had become the longest and most intense engagement of her military career. The lives of over 200 Marines depended on her ability to continue fighting until reinforcements could finally reach their position. She checked her equipment one final time and settled behind her rifle, ready for whatever the approaching darkness might bring. Darkness brought an eerie quiet to the valley as both sides paused to reassess their positions. Maria used night vision equipment to scan for enemy movement, knowing that the insurgents would likely attempt a final assault under cover of darkness. The temperature dropped significantly, causing condensation to form on her scope lens, requiring constant maintenance to ensure clear visibility. Torres had successfully stabilized Mitchell's injuries and restored partial communications capability. The wounded Marine insisted on maintaining his radio duties despite obvious pain from shrapnel wounds. Their determination strengthened Maria's resolve as she prepared for what would likely be the most challenging phase of the entire engagement. Through intermittent radio contact, they learned that elements of Alpha Company had finally broken through the outer ring of enemy resistance and were approximately 2 hours away from their position. However, the insurgents appeared determined to overrun the observation post before reinforcements could arrive, understanding that failure would mean the complete collapse of their ambush operation. Maria's night vision revealed movement at multiple locations around their position. Enemy fighters were using the darkness to advance closer than they had dared during daylight hours. She began engaging targets at ranges as close as 50 meters, each shot illuminated by muzzle flash that temporarily destroyed her night vision and revealed her position to the enemy. The tactical situation had become a deadly game of cat and mouse. Maria would fire, then immediately change position to avoid return fire directed at her muzzle flash. Torres provided security for their flanks, while Mitchell coordinated with approaching friendly forces despite his injuries. Their teamwork had become perfectly synchronized through hours of combat. Enemy fighters launched coordinated assaults from 3 directions simultaneously, forcing Maria to prioritize targets rapidly while conserving her remaining ammunition. She had only 4 rounds left for her rifle, and was increasingly relying on her sidearm for close-range threats. Each shot required perfect accuracy, as they could not afford to waste ammunition. A disturbing development emerged when Torres identified enemy fighters wearing captured Marine equipment, making target identification much more challenging in the darkness. Maria had to verify each target carefully before engaging, creating dangerous delays that allowed insurgents to advance closer to their position. The sound of approaching aircraft provided hope until Maria realized they were insurgent reinforcements arriving by helicopter in a distant valley. The enemy was clearly committed to achieving victory before American reinforcements could arrive. Fresh fighters began appearing on the battlefield, armed with additional rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns. Mitchell managed to establish clearer radio contact and learned that the Quick Reaction Force had encountered a major roadside bomb that destroyed 2 vehicles and killed several Marines. Their arrival would be delayed by at least another hour while they dealt with casualties and cleared the route. The observation post would need to hold for much longer than anticipated. Enemy fighters began using captured American equipment to communicate on Marine frequencies, creating confusion and attempting to mislead the defenders about friendly force locations. Mitchell worked to verify all transmissions, while Maria continued engaging an increasing number of targets from multiple directions. The physical demands of the prolonged engagement were becoming overwhelming. Maria's hands shook from exhaustion and stress, making precision shooting increasingly difficult. She had been fighting for nearly 12 hours with minimal water and no food, surviving on adrenaline and determination alone. Torres shared his remaining water, but their supplies were critically low. A rocket-propelled grenade struck the observation post's main defensive barrier, creating a large breach that exposed them to direct assault. Enemy fighters immediately attempted to exploit this weakness, forcing Maria to abandon her sniper rifle and engage with her sidearm at point-blank range. The fighting became hand-to-hand as insurgents reached the edge of their position. Torres engaged multiple enemies with his rifle, while Maria used her sidearm and combat knife to defend against fighters who had reached their defensive perimeter. Mitchell, despite his injuries, provided supporting fire with his personal weapon. The 3 Marines fought desperately to prevent the position from being overrun. During the close-quarters fighting, Maria exhausted her sidearm ammunition and was forced to rely on her combat knife and physical training. Years of martial arts instruction and combat conditioning allowed her to defeat 2 insurgent fighters in hand-to-hand combat, but the physical exertion was enormous given her already exhausted state. The tide of battle shifted when Torres spotted muzzle flashes from the valley floor that belonged to advancing American forces. Elements of Alpha Company had finally arrived and were engaging enemy positions from the rear. The insurgents found themselves caught between the observation post they had failed to capture and fresh Marine forces advancing from below. Maria retrieved a rifle from a fallen insurgent and resumed long-range engagement of enemy positions. Her knowledge of the battlefield allowed her to direct accurate fire at insurgent positions that were not visible to the newly arrived Marines. The coordination between the observation post and the relief force began systematically destroying the remaining enemy resistance. Enemy fighters began withdrawing from their positions as the tactical situation deteriorated. Many attempted to escape through predetermined routes, but Maria's elevated position allowed her to engage retreating insurgents effectively. The ambush force that had threatened over 200 Marines was finally collapsing. Dawn was breaking across the mountains when the first Marine reinforcements finally reached the observation post. The 3 defenders had successfully held their position for over 14 hours against overwhelming odds. Maria's precision shooting had eliminated dozens of enemy fighters and prevented the ambush from achieving its objectives. Medical personnel immediately began treating Mitchell's injuries while Maria and Torres provided detailed briefings about enemy positions and casualties. The intelligence gathered during their prolonged engagement proved invaluable for clearing remaining insurgent positions in the surrounding area. The final casualty count revealed the true scope of what had been prevented. The insurgent force had numbered over 80 fighters armed with heavy weapons and supported by mortars. Their plan had been to inflict massive casualties on the Marine patrol and capture advanced American equipment. Maria's defense of the observation post had disrupted this plan and saved countless lives. Recovery teams found evidence that the ambush had been planned for months, with detailed intelligence about Marine patrol routes and communication frequencies. The enemy had invested significant resources in an operation designed to create a propaganda victory through American casualties. The failure of their plan represented a major tactical defeat. Maria received immediate medical attention for exhaustion and minor injuries sustained during the close-quarters fighting. She had fired over 100 rifle rounds and engaged multiple enemies in hand-to-hand combat while coordinating the defense of a critical position. Her actions during the engagement would later be recognized with the Silver Star. The observation post was abandoned shortly after the battle, having been too severely damaged to remain operationally useful. However, its brief existence had proven decisive in preventing a significant tactical defeat. The 3 Marines who defended it had demonstrated the kind of courage and determination that defines the Corps. Word of Maria's stand spread quickly throughout the Marine Corps, inspiring other service members and challenging stereotypes about women in combat roles. Her success proved that courage and skill were not limited by gender, and her example encouraged other women to pursue challenging military occupations. The battle became a case study at military academies, demonstrating the importance of individual initiative and marksmanship in modern warfare. Maria's tactical decisions and shooting accuracy under extreme pressure provided valuable lessons for future Marine snipers and small unit leaders. Years later, Maria would reflect on those 14 hours as the defining moment of her military career. The responsibility of protecting over 200 Marines had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she possessed. The experience reinforced her belief that proper training, mental preparation, and unwavering determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The valley where the battle occurred was later named Rodriguez Pass in honor of her actions. A small memorial was erected at the site of the observation post, commemorating the 3 Marines who held the line when defeat seemed certain. Their story became part of Marine Corps legend, inspiring future generations of warriors who would face their own moments of truth in defense of their fellow Marines.